Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial on creating a context diagram with Visio 2016. So this is a lecture. Well, it's not really a lecture, it's a tutorial now, isn't it? I just said that. This is a tutorial for my systems analysis class. And this is a new version for a couple of reasons. One is that this is the first semester we're using Visio 2016, so I wanted to get a new version to show that. This is also the first time I'm using Windows 10. Okay, so that's new. And this is a new problem that we're tackling. I used to do a different one, and now I like this one better. It's one that I'm using throughout the course. So, first of all, let's get up Visio 2016. So I'm going to go down and find that, and it's in my list of applications, and we're going to fire it up. And I'm going to pretend that I haven't been here before, okay, because you probably, when you're going to be using Visio, this could be the first time that you're going to be using this particular template. And the templates are a little sticky in Visio, so it's easier to find them once you've already been there. So let's act like we haven't been there. So let's click on Categories. And the category that we want is Software and Database. So click on that. And the context diagrams are the top level part of a systems analysis documentation method called data flow diagramming that have been around for quite a while, like 30, 40 years. And so we're looking for something to do data flow diagrams with. There are two templates here in Visio 2016. The one that's just called data flow diagram is not the one we want. That's the one that uses the original circular symbols that were developed by Jordan and DeMarco. And the one on the right here, a data flow model diagram, is the one that we want. And these use the more modern symbols developed by Geen and Sarsen. And because those are the symbols that are used in our textbook, those are the ones that we're going to use. And they're a little prettier too. So we're going to click on that. Since I'm in the US, I always use US units, and then click on Create. And here we've got the diagrammer. Okay, so let's get ourselves properly situated. Okay, first of all, when I do data flow diagramming, I typically use the electronic paper in the landscape orientation, and I have to confess that I've been doing data flow diagrams for 30, 40 years, and I did them before we were drawing them electronically. And what I typically would use would be copy paper. Because I'm in the US, it would be letter size, 8.5 by 11 copy paper. I'd use a Pentel mechanical pencil and a really good Pentel high polymer eraser, and I still use those to do my design drawings. And I would write on the paper and its landscape orientation. And still, I'm very much influenced by those choices even today when I'm doing them electronically. So I'm going to go to the design mode, and over in the toolbar on the left side there's orientation. So I'll take the drop down on that and say I want landscape. Okay. Alrighty. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of context diagrams, and then we'll start to talk about how to make an appropriate one for the application that we have in mind. So if you look over here on the left side in the palette of shapes, there are four shapes. There's the process, there's what they call an interface, okay, and in the traditional parlance of data flow diagramming, these things are called external entities. These are things outside of our system, people, organizations, other systems. And then down here on the right is a line with the connectors on it, and lines are used to show data flow. So a context diagram is the simplest sort. Oh, and there's a fourth symbol here for a data store. And we're not going to use it because context diagrams traditionally do not show data stores. Okay? So a context diagram has a single process, so we'll drag out a process here. And it's usually represented as being fairly big. So I'll make it kind of big. All right. And it typically, the name of the process is the name of the system. So in here we've got the system name. Okay. And then we have typically these external entities. Let's have two. Okay. And then the data flows are what connect the system entities to the external entities to the system. Okay. And basically, the context diagram historically has been known for being a great way to describe to people the scope of the system that you're trying to design or build. Okay? Because the entire system is in a single symbol. Okay? It's a single process. And we're trying to answer the question, what in the world communicates with our system, and what are the parts of that communication in terms of information flows? Okay, so it's a great way to describe the overall scope of our system, and that's why we use it in my systems analysis class. Okay, so what's the example that we're going to use? Well, I have a system that I've been threatening to create now for at least a year. And a part of my teaching, I teach at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, UWM. At the School of Information Studies. We call it SOAS. And in our department, at least for the undergraduates, we require attendance and we ask them to sign in when they come to class so we can see who is there. Well, I have these ratty old sign-in logs that people sign, and at the end of the semester I have to go through them and tally them and all that kind of stuff. And what I've done is to come up, I've done the systems analysis and gathered the requirements for an automated system that keeps track of the attendance of my students at my classes. Now this isn't implemented yet, and as time goes by, I keep improving my understanding of the requirements. But this is something that I'll be using. This is an application that I'll be talking about as I demonstrate a number of the skills that we'll be doing in this course. So you'll see this one again. And I call it the attendance system. Okay. And here are the players that are involved. The student is involved. Okay. The instructor is involved as well. Okay. I think there's probably going to be a system administrator for my system. Okay. And well, that's about it in terms of users. Okay. Then I'm going to have what kind of functionality? Well, the instructor is going to have to set up a course and do things like tell the system about a particular semester, tell the system about a particular class, tell the system about the schedule for a particular class so we know the days on which it's going to meet and the time. The instructor is going to have to provide the roster for the class so we know who can attend. We also need a way for, and I haven't said this yet, but I'm thinking of this as a web application. So we also need a way for the application to know that people are really in attendance when they're signing in, right? Because it's a web application. In theory, you would be able to log onto it from anywhere. Well, I've had a number of thoughts. One is to make everybody sign in with the machines that are in the lab where I teach, and they have a certain range of IP addresses. So I've thought about that. But my current version is that I'm just going to have a password. And the password's going to be time sensitive. And it's going to change every minute or so. And I'm going to display it automatically in the front of the classroom. And you're going to have to be able to see it and put the password in order to log your attendance at the class. Okay, so it's not perfect, it's not cheat proof, but it's cheat resistant. And that's what I like. Okay, so that's my best idea so far. So the instructor would have to set up the class meeting password as well. Then at a certain point, the instructor would want to generate an attendance report for a particular class, okay, a particular class meeting. So you want to say, okay, the systems analysis class on Tuesday at 10:45 in the morning, who was there? And who was not. Okay. And the other thing that I, as the instructor, might want to do would be to run a report that said, for all the class meetings that have happened so far, who's been there how many times and who's been missing how many times. All right, so that's going to meet my goals as a user. Well, what about the student? Well, the student is going to want to be able to log attendance. So they're going to want to be able to say, okay, I'm here for this class, I'm logging in, I'm here. And then I think that the student probably also wants to be able to say, was I at a particular class? Or what's the summary of all of my attendance semester to date in this particular class? Okay. And so those are the requirements as I currently understand them. All right. So how would we represent this in a context diagram? Well, first of all, we need to represent the system. So let's do that. So the system name, I'm calling it attendance system. And sometimes when I'm using Visio for these kinds of diagrams, the type is too small for me. So what I like to do is for attendance system, let's go back to the home. This is in Calibri 10. For a system, I might like to put it in 24-point type, something like that. That's going to look a lot better. All right. A good old Windows 10 is keeping me busy. All right, then so we know what the system is, and I've kind of described the functionality that's inside of it. Okay, so now what we want to describe is what's going on between the users and the system, right? So when I say users, I mean this in a broad sense. This could be people. This could be other systems. Okay, what is going to interact with our attendance system? Well, I talked about two user groups. Okay, one is the instructor, right? And again, I'm thinking that that type's a little small at 10 point, so I'm going to make it maybe 16 point. Well, maybe. What about 14 point? Yeah, that's going to fit right there. I like that. So I have the instructor and I have the student. So I double click on the icon. I've been doing that, but I haven't really been said what I've been doing, so apologize for that. Double click on it. And I'm just going to, in this case, I'm going to say student, and I'm going to make student, highlight that. Oh, I can change that right there. Well, I can. Now, 14-point type. Okay, that's looking pretty good. All right, so at this point, we've really made a lot of the decisions about the scope of the system. Okay, we haven't expressed it all, but I talked about a lot of the functionality, and we know that's all inside of the process symbol called attendance system. I've talked about who's going to be using the system. Okay. The only person who I said is going to be using the system that I haven't represented on here is the system administrator. So let's bring in system admin in. Okay, and I kind of like things to be lined up like that. So, and let's call this system carriage return admin, and I think we were making those 14 points, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, system admin. And one of the things I have to say here is that the behavior of this 2016 version of the application in terms of when I click on a symbol, it kind of focusing in on it, and then when I unclick on it, it kind of zooms out. This is probably the best behavior that I've seen in any of the recent versions of the Visio product, so I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so in a data flow diagram, of which the context diagram is the most high-level part, and it's the only part that we use in my class, we have processes. Okay, we've got one on the context diagram. We have these external entities, the instructor, the student, the system admin, okay? The only other symbol that we show are data flows. Data flows are arrows with a name and a direction. So let's look at what this would look like. So let's think about the student. So let's say that the student wants to, no, it's not going there. Okay, sorry. So this is my data flow. I have to pull out the data flow. So let's say that the data flow is going to go from the student, hook it into the student, okay? And then we're going to pull it to the system. All right, there we are. And it's a little bit hard to see here, but if we were to zoom in, why don't we zoom in a little bit? You can see that there's an arrow pointing to the system. So they're unidirectional, okay? And they represent either information or sometimes they can represent physical material flow. Okay, so if a student wants to log their attendance, okay, then what information is in that data flow? Well, probably they have to identify themselves, right? They're going to need to identify themselves. They're going to need to say what class this is for. Probably that's about it. Okay, so that kind of a data flow, let's call this as an attendance report. Okay, and historically we used to put hyphens in these because we wanted them to be recognized as phrases. So I'm just going to do that again. I'm just going to call it attendance-report. Okay. So they're going to report their attendance. Okay. What are they going to get back? Well, they're probably going to get back some kind of confirmation, right? So let's show that. So this is going to go to the student. It's going to come from, sorry about that. Got to undo that one. It's going to come from the system. Okay. And let's call it attendance report confirmation. Okay. How's that look? Now, you might want to ask yourself, is that type big enough? And I'm thinking that maybe it's a little small at 8 point. So I'm going to try 11 point. I'm liking that better. Yeah, and I'm going to go up to attendance report and do the same thing. Put that into 11 point type. Okay. All right, I like that. Now, there's a couple things going on here that I want to point out. Okay. Thing number one is that there is a cycle of interaction between this external entity, the student, and the system. And most system usage has this kind of cyclical nature. Okay? Any effective information system, if you're going to give it information, then it's going to confirm that it got it. Okay? If it's going to request information from you, it's going to request information, and you're going to send in the information. So there's this kind of circular pattern that goes on between these external entities who operate as system users and this system itself. And this pattern is one that we're going to see time and again. Okay? Okay, well, what other kind of pattern goes on? Well, we said that the student could request some kind of, maybe let's call it an attendance summary. Okay, so let's have the student send in a request. So this is going to, again, it's going to start with the student. Okay, it's going to go to the system. Okay, and again, the names of data flows, even though the sending of the data is an action, data flows have names that are nouns. Okay, so that's why we didn't say report attendance. We said attendance report. Okay, so let's call this a summary report request. Okay, how's that? And put that up to 11 point. All right. Now we've got lines kind of crossing a bit here, so you can usually highlight the line, find a little handle on it. I have a blue dot, and I can see that that's getting better there, and move this one up here, and I can move this one in a bit and down. And now these two are not conflicting with each other in quite the same way. Okay? Okay, and then what are we going to get back? Well, we're going to get back a summary report, right? So let's take a look at that. Okay, so it's a data flow, and it's going to start in the attendance system. Okay, and it's going to go to the student, and let's pull it down a little bit there, and double click on it and say summary report. And I'd like to put that in 11 point type as well. Okay, pretty good. So typically what I do is I'll work with one of these external entities at a time, and I'll try to exhaust all of my ideas about how these people and or other systems, they can be other systems, interact with the system. And typically I am putting down the data flows in pairs. There's typically a request and a response in one direction or the other. And when you think about the way modern systems work, typically it's the user who has the request, and it's the system who has the response. Right? Now, I'm sure you could find exceptions to that, but almost any kind of interaction with the system you could characterize in that kind of way. So having a series of cyclical interactions with the system is typically what you see between an external entity like student and a system like attendance system. Okay, pretty typical behavior. Okay. Now, as long as we're doing this, let's talk about system admin. Okay. So what might the system admin do? Well, the system admin might authorize a user, right? And so we might have from the system admin, they might ask the system they might send in an authorization request. Okay. Wish we could spell authorization. Put the H in it. There it is. It didn't like that spelling. We probably would, typically what I do is I just would send the positive response back. Okay, yeah, it's possible for us to, in these kind of interactions with the system, it's possible for us to get a bad outcome. So instead of getting a confirmation back, you're getting some kind of error back. Historically, what we've done with data flow diagrams, at least in the beginning, is to show the good case. Okay, so here, again, what would we get back? Well, it's a data flow. Let's drag a data flow out. So from the system, I don't even know which way that one's going, so I'm going to undo that because I can't figure it out. So this one is from the system, and this is to, that was bad behavior, but let's highlight that and drag this over. Going to the system admin, and again, we don't like cross lines, so we're going to get rid of that. Okay, and what are we going to get back? We're going to get an authorization confirmation. This is where the system says, okay, you asked me to authorize Kevin Trainer, and Kevin Trainer is authorized. Okay, now we're going to get into a distinction that I think it's important to understand, and that is this. In data flow diagramming, we only show action that happens as a part of interaction with the system. Okay? If users of a system interact with another system to get something done, that's interesting information. It's just not on our diagram. Or if they happen to interact with each other in order to get something done. Well, again, it's interesting information. It's just not part of our diagram. So you have to ask yourself here, how do the student and the system admin, how do they interact with each other about getting the student authorized to use the system? Well, there's a lot of ways that this could happen, but the question is it going to be mediated by the attendance system itself? Well, how could that happen? Well, there are systems where you want to use them. You log in and you say, I want to become a user, and you give information about yourself, and you're given maybe a provisional login ID and a provisional password, but you can't really do anything until somebody's approved you, somebody like a system admin. And when they approve you, you get some kind of oh, let's say get an email back that says, yeah, you're approved. You're a real user of the attendance system now. Okay? So, yes, that interaction between the student and the system admin is mediated by the attendance system itself. Or perhaps we have a world where students and system admins need to just coordinate with each other, perhaps through university email, perhaps through announcements that are made in class, perhaps through notes that students give to the instructor gives to the system admin. We get the job done. So what I'm going to say here is that even though we could mediate that communication through the attendance system, I'm going to leave that out because I'm deciding that for now, it's not within the scope of system features. Okay? All right. So let's go up and concentrate on the interactions between the instructor and the attendance system. Now, I had said that the system had to know about the current semester, it had to know about the current class, it had to know about the meeting schedule. Okay. It had to know about the class roster. It had to know about the meeting password. Okay. So this instructor is a really intensive user of the system. And because of that, we're going to have a lot of interaction. Okay. Now, I guess that's good. The thing is, we're going to have a hard time having enough room here. So what could we do? Well, sometimes what you need to do is you need to make these external entities a little bigger just so you have more real estate to connect arrows to. Okay, so there's nothing that says that all of these external entity symbols, things that in our textbook are called information sources and sinks, there's nothing that says they all have to be drawn to the same scale. Okay, it does say that they should, that they should be, I think, rectangular. It's kind of nice that they're squares. I'm not sure they have to be a square, but they definitely have to be a rectangle like this one is. Okay, so let's put some of the stuff in here. Okay, so let's say that we need to set up a class. Okay, so let's say that that's going to be something that the instructor is going to do. They're going to have a class setup request, and then there's going to be a confirmation that comes back. Okay, so where does that go? It's coming from the instructor. It's going to the attendance system, right? And what it is it's a class setup request. All right, and you'll remember we wanted these in 11 point, so put that in 11 point. All right. And I'm hoping what's going to come to your mind immediately is, well, if the instructor sends a request in, they should get a confirmation back. And I would say, yeah, great, you've got it. This is the way it's going to work. So it's going to be from the system. And let's send it to the instructor. And let's call it, it's a class setup confirmation. Put that in 11 point as well. Okay. So again, I need room, okay? And there are times when I just wish I had more of it. So here I'm going to make this as big as it can, and I'm going to put this one over here. Well, sorry about that. Undo. On my my machine here, it's Control Z. So do that. Do this. Class setup confirmation. Okay, that's good. Now what I'm seeing is I'm still not going to have enough room here. So I'm going to try to make this attendance system thing a little bit bigger. So I'll have more real estate on that. So I can draw more arrows. Okay, that looks pretty good. I could do the same thing with the instructor symbol. Okay, make that a little bigger. So I'd have a little more room on there. So we set up a class. Maybe we need to enter the class roster. Okay, so here's where you really get some artistic opportunity. Okay, are we going to say that one cycle of interacting with the system is going to be the instructor gives a roster and the system gives a confirmation back? Or are we going to make it a little more general and say the instructor identifies a student for a class and there's a confirmation? Okay. I'm thinking that it would be better if we did a student at a time, because maybe we had to add one late. Maybe we had to subtract one. Maybe we had to do something like that. So I kind of like it a student at a time. So again, let's from the instructor to the system. Okay, and what are we going to get? Well, and this is interesting, the system admin's up here, so let's pull that guy down. Okay, that's better. Every once in a while your lines will get a little haywire. Okay, and we're going to pull this down even further. Okay, pull that guy down a little further too. All right, and we're going to double click on this, and let's say that this is let's say that the transaction we're going to have is we're going to have add, change, delete registration. Okay, we can either add a registration, change a registration, delete a registration. So I'm going to call it add, change, delete registration. Okay. And I didn't make that type any bigger, so let's make that type a little bigger. Let's make it 11 point. Okay. So, and then let's come up here and let's give it a response. Let's call it a registration change confirmation. So it's coming from the system, going to the instructor, and I'm saying that these are working better than they used to work in the last version. So I'm happier with this product than I was with the 2010 and 2013 versions. Okay, and we're going to call this registration change confirmation. Okay, make that a little bigger. 11 point. Okay. 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 And you know, something that I'm realizing now, it's interesting. The more you talk about this, the better that you get. Another thing I had for the instructor to do was to set the password for a particular class meeting, but my thought now is that that should change every couple of minutes. And maybe that's just an automated feature of the way the attendance system works. So we're just going to leave that out for now. Okay. And let's see, the next thing that they would want to do is let's have some kind of a summary report request for the instructor. So we could do the same thing. They could send a summary report request. Come from the instructor and go to the system. Summary report request. Now, even if the same thing can come from several sources, you need, if it can come from several sources, you need to show it coming from several sources. And what's going to come back? Well, a summary report. Okay, so let's just show a summary report coming back in that direction. So starting with the system and pull that guy up. Oh, that's not behaving well. So let's undo that guy and try again. So we're going to start with the system, and we're going to pull it over here to the instructor, and let's just call it a summary report. Okay, and now we make that type 11 point. All right, and now we're going to click off of there, and it's all going to come back. So as you can see, we have 3 users identified. Users of the systems get represented as these external entities. They are things, they're entities external to the system. Okay. Our textbook likes to call them sources and sinks. The only problem that I have is that, as you can see from the diagram that we have here, it's hard to characterize an external entity as either a source or a sink. In a well-drawn context diagram, the external entity typically communicates with our system in a cyclical way. Request, response, request, response. So are they a net source or sink? Well, I think that's something that isn't really even worth the time to characterize. I mean, they're the source of what they're the source of, and then they consume what they consume, right? So that's why I like to call them external entities, which is what Ed Jordan originally called them, and I think that's a great name. Okay. So what you see is what you get. All right. So that means the following. If you don't see interactions going on in the diagram, well then they're not part of the system. Okay? If somebody says, oh, you forgot to show where the instructor sends in this request and the system sends back such and such a response, you would say, typically you'd say, oh no, we're just not putting it on the diagram. Oh, if it's being done, you're going to put it on the diagram, because this is a one-stop shopping expression of what the scope of the project is. Okay? So when you review these with stakeholders, you're going to be saying, you know, this is it. Can you think of things that we were talking about that we left out? No, that seems to be it. Or, yeah, how about the such and such report? Oh, I thought we weren't doing that. Oh, no, we need to do that still. Okay, let's add that in. Okay, so if it's being done, it's being shown. We never show interactions between external entities, direct interaction. So you can imagine here, there's a lot of direct interaction between the instructor and the student that's not mediated by the system, or might be mediated by some other system. Fine. We just don't show it. It doesn't belong on the diagram. Okay? But if we have an interaction that goes on between two external entities that's mediated by our system, and the example that I would give would be, what if we wanted the student to be able to tell the system admin that they wanted to access the system, or we wanted the system admin to be able to tell the student that they were free now to access the system, or some combination of those two. Then we would be showing not flows directly from the system admin to the student or in the other direction. We would show flows that go through the system. Okay, so we only show the system mediating the work that it actually mediates, and if there is work between and among the external entities that's not mediated by the system, we just don't show it. It's interesting information. It's just not part of the scope of our project, so it doesn't get put into our diagram. Okay, now we're almost done. All right. Something that I like to do a lot is to say on the context diagram, say it's a context diagram. Okay, so how would I do that? Well, somewhere here we have a label tool. Let's see if I can find it. Text. So we take text and we're going to put that here. And I'm going to say context diagram. And I'm going to make this even bigger type. So I'll make this maybe 30-point type and make it bold. Something like that. Okay? I like to have that there. So now I'm going to save this. Right? So what would I call this? Well, I would call this in my course. Okay? So I was up in the wrong menu. File, save as. Okay. And I'm going to put this into documents for right now. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to start with my last name, Trainer, Kevin. Skills practice. context diagram. Right? And I'd save it. Okay, but in my class, we hand in PDFs, okay? And we do it because we don't want to have to save the same version of the software on every machine. And so we're going to take this and we're going to say File and Print, okay? And under Printer, let's look for print to file. Okay, and it says here, right here, Microsoft Print to PDF ready. Okay, that's looking good. So I'm going to click on the print button. And now it's going to ask me. So I'm going to highlight the file name that I had for this. And I think it's going to get the PDF extension automatically. Let's look. This file name is invalid, so maybe not. Maybe we want it to say, .pdf. Let's see if that works. It looks like it probably does. So let's look. Shrink that. And I'm going to go find my File Explorer. I'm going to go to Documents. And I'm going to find my PDF file. And I'm going to open it. And I don't have the PDF reader, so for right now I'm going to show it in Firefox. And that seems to work pretty well. Okay? So just to review, the context diagram is an expression of scope of project. The general approach that we're using is called data flow diagramming. This is what would have been the top level diagram of a set of diagrams, but that's all we do. That's all of the methodology that we're using. The symbols that we show are the process symbol in the middle that represents the whole system. The external entity symbols that are squares, at least in this diagram. And the data flows, which are lines, they're directional arrows. And the directional arrows have a data flow name. The data flow name is always a noun. It's information. It's a thing. Okay? A lot of times people get fooled and they think, well, this exchanging of information is very action-like. So they want to give it a verb name. Not the way the rules go. Nouns. Okay? Now, how do you turn a verb into a noun? Well, something like this. This student is requesting a summary report. Instead of saying request summary report, we call it a summary report request. So you got to turn it into a noun. Okay? The name of the system is a noun. All right? The name of these external entities, which are individual people who are going to use the system, potentially roles that people play, potentially departments that interact with the system, potentially other systems that interact with the system, but they're always a noun. Okay, so all nouns all the time, no verbs. All right? Okay, give it a shot. I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.